Percentages are used to express proportions or fractions when the total quantity is taken out of 100. If I say 25% of fruits in a basket are apples, here I'm assuming that there are 25 apples in a basket full of 100 fruits. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be actually 25 apples in a basket of 100 fruits. It can also mean there is one apple in a basket full of four fruits, or two apples in a basket of 8 fruits, or three apples in a basket of 12, or likewise, there can be many more combinations. But they all mean it's 25% of them are apples. Why is that so? How are we forming that connection? Why would 1 out of 4 means it's equal to 25%? So when I express a quantity as a percent, here I'm assuming that the total is taken out of 100. So the total in a fraction 1 quarters is 4 here. So 4 can be scaled up to 100 by timesing it by 25. So 4 times 25 gives me 100. I do the same thing for numerator as well. So 25 times 1 gives me 25. So a quarter is equal to 25 out of 100, which is 25%. Similarly, 2/8 is equal to a quarter as a fraction. They are equivalent fractions. They can be reduced. 2/8 can be reduced to a quarter, which again means it's a 25%. Or 3/12 or 4/16, they all means it's 25%. Similarly, for instance, there's another example. If I say in a class there are 2/5 of the students in a class are girls here, and we are asked to find the percentage of girls in the class, I have to express the total here, which is 5, in terms of 100. So to express it as a percent, the total has to be taken from 100. So how can I scale up 5 to make it 100? I need to times it by 20. So I do the same thing for numerator to make it 40. So 2/5 is equal to 40 over 100, which is 40%. So there are 40% students in the class are girls when I say 2/5 of the students are girls. And the remaining 60% will be boys. We usually come across questions where we are asked to make conversions between fractions, decimals, and percentages because they all are connected. So here there's an example where there's this table which says we have to form this connection between percent, decimals, and fractions. For instance, the first one is given here, 77%. So what would it mean when I say 77%? It means it's 77 parts out of a total 100. Now I have expressed this percent as a fraction. So that's a 77 out of 100 is a fraction. This can be expressed as a decimal as 0.77. So when I write 77 over 100 as a decimal, I shift the decimal 2 places to the left. So this is 0.77 as a decimal. A decimal which is 0.25 can be expressed as a fraction or a percent. So as a fraction, 0.25 is 25 out of 100, which is a quarter again. And 25 out of 100 as a percent is 25%. 3/5 as a fraction is equal to what number as a percent? So to make it equal to some percent, we need to express the denominator or the total here is as 100. So I can scale up 5 to make it 100 but times it by 20. So I do the same thing for numerator. So 3 times 20 makes 60. 60 out of 100 is 60%, which is equal to 0.60 or just 0.6 in terms of decimal. What about 33.3 repeating? That's the recurring decimal. So 33.3 repeating percent can be written as a fraction as 33.3 repeating out of 100. Or this is equal to 333, and this 3 keeps on repeating out of a total 1,000, which is equal to 0.333 or this can be repeating, or we can write null point 3 repeating, which is actually equal to a 1/3. 1/3 is equal to 33.3 repeating percent. What about null point 1? Null point 1 is 1 out of total 10 parts. So this can be expressed as how many parts out of a total 100. This has to be times by 100. I do the same thing for numerator to make it 10 parts out of 100 is equal to 1 part out of 10. So that's a 10%. What about 75%? 75% means 75 out of a total 100, which is equal to a 3/4. Well, this as a decimal is null point 0.75. We are often asked to express certain quantities in terms of percents, like find 10% of 95, or 6% of 85, or like 7% of 36, 15% of 105. Such questions, to deal with them, if we know some easy percents, especially when we are dealing with mental math or non-calculator paper, it becomes easier for you to handle such questions. So there are 4 easy percents. Like if you know how to find 1% of a quantity, or 10%, 50%, 100%. Now, finding any other percentage will be a combination of them only. So let's begin with the 1% and see how to express a quantity as 1% of it. So 1% means 1 out of a total 100. So if we divide a quantity by 100, we are actually finding 1% of that quantity. 10% is 10 parts out of a total 100 parts. So that as a fraction is 1/10. So if I divide a quantity by 10, I am finding 10% or 10th part of that quantity. 50% is half of the quantity. So 50 out of 100 is half of the quantity. So if I divide the quantity by 2, I'm finding 50% of that quantity. 100% represents the total quantity. So to find 100% of a quantity, we are actually taking the whole quantity there. So we divide the quantity by 1 to find its 100%. Now, any other percentage will be a combination of 1 or 2 or all of them. So what do I mean by that? For example, if I have to find what is 17% of a quantity, so here I can use 1% by dividing the quantity by 100, and then I can find 7% by times the quantity by 7. So 1% times 7 will give you 7% of that quantity. And then I find 10% of the quantity by dividing the quantity by 10, and then add 7% to 10% to get 17% of the quantity. So this is the technique we use usually for mental math questions. So let's see a few examples and how exactly to deal with them. So here we have some easy questions. Work out 10% of 95 pounds. So 95 pounds is the total quantity. 10% of it means we divide the quantity by 10 to find 10th part of it. So 95 divided by 10 is 9.5. 9.5 pounds is 10% of 95 pounds. 50% of 1200 grams. 1200 is the total quantity, or the 100% of the quantity. 50% of it will be half of it. Half of 1200 is 600 grams. And then we have 1% of 200 liters. So 200 liters represents 100%. 1% will be, you divide the quantity by 100 to get 1% of that quantity. So 200 divided by 100 is 2. 2 liters is equal to, like 1% of 200 is 2 liters. Find 21% of 160 pounds. So I can find 21% in terms of these easy percents, a combination of the easy percents. So I can find 1% and then 10% and then 20%. So from 1%, I divide this quantity by 100 to get 1% of it. So 160 divided by 100 gives me a 1.6. And then 10%, I divide the quantity by 10 to get a 16. To get 20% from 10%, I double 10% to get 20. So 10 times 2 gives me 20. So 16 times 2, or double of 16, is 32. 32 is 20% of the quantity given to us. So now to find 21%, I can add these two. So that's a 1.6 is added to 32. So 1.6 and 32, when I add, I get 33.6. So that's the 21% of 160 pounds. The next question is 45% of 820. Here we can have many approaches here to making use of the easy percents. So first I can find 10% of the quantity and then half it to get 5%, and then I can find 40% of the quantity. So 10 times 4 gives me 40% of the quantity, and then I add 5% to 40% to get 45%. Or you can have an alternate approach. You can find 5% of the quantity and then 50% and subtract them to get 45%. Any of them should yield you the same answer. So it's fine. Whatever you find easier, can go with that. So I'm going with this approach now. Finding the 10% of 820. To find 10%, I divide the quantity by 10 to get 82. So 10% of 820 is 82. 55% will be half of 10%. So half of 10% is half of 82, which is 41. So 5% is 41. 40% will be 4 times 10%. So 4 times 82 is 4 2s is 8, 4 8s is 32. It's 328. So 40% is 328, 5% is 41. To get 45%, I need to add 40 to 5%. So I need to add these two parts, these two quantities. 8 plus 1 is 9, 6, 369 is the 45% of 820. So this is the answer. The next is 36% of 2500. So again, I can use combination here. First, I can find 1% of 2500 by dividing it by 100 to get 25. 25 is 1% of 2500. 6% I can find by times this. So 1 times 6 gives me 6%. So this also 25 times 6 gives me the 6% of that quantity. 6 5s is 30, 6 2s is 12, plus 3 is 15, 150. 6% is 150. And then I can find 10%. So 10% of 25 is, you divide the quantity by 10. So that gives me 250. And then 30%, you get 10 times 3. So 250 times 3 gives me 30%. So 3 5s is 15. 3 2s is 6 plus 1, 750. So 750 is 30% of 2500. Now to get 36%, I have to add 30 and 6% together. So I need to add these two quantities. So 150 plus 750 will give me 5 plus 5 is 10, not this one. So this will be 7, 8, 9, 900. So 36% of 2500 is 900.